and welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. My name is Omar Pinto, the host of the Share Podcast and a founding member of the SRC, the Share Recovery Community. In the SRC, we have a number of live online recovery meetings every week on a number of different topics. This podcast is only one example of the content provided to our members. In this meeting, a chapter of the Tao Te Ching is discussed every week as to how it relates to recovery. I hope you enjoy this week's podcast episode.
Hey everyone, Buddy C. It's the February 14th, 2019 Tao Te Ching meeting. Happy Valentine's Day to you ladies, to Marla and Kate. Hope y'all have a great Valentine's Day today.
Thank you.
And Craig, I wish you, I don't know, should I wish you happy Valentine's? I can. You're on another continent, so I can wish you happy Valentine's as a guy.
Listen, I'm confident enough in my sexuality to say thank you very much. Valentine's Day, you.
I'm a little shaky sometimes in mine, so. All right, let's get on the topic. Okay.
Get the flowers that I sent you.
No, not yet. Thank you. They should come later today, I guess.
I was talking to Marla and Katie.
Oh.
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
It's still about me, regardless.
If you did get them, don't tell my wife because I never sent her any.
My wife said, this year, let's just not, we don't do flowers at Valentine's because our anniversary is end of January. So we don't do another set of flowers that's close. And so she said, she said, let's just not do cards this year. And I said, are you sure? And I'd already bought her a card. And I said, well, okay. She said, well, your response isn't real good with that. We'll do cards. I said, no, don't give me a card. If you give me a card, I said, you're not getting nothing in return. Because that's the only way to shut her down because she thought she hurt my feelings by not. I just saved her card for next year. I already have it bought. I don't even have to buy one for next year. I've got it in the drawer, and I'll just get it out next year. So
I've had the same birthday card for my wife in the drawer for the past 3 years. One of these days, I'll get around to actually writing it out.
You actually give her a card on her birthday?
I think I did once.
My wife is very big on sentimental stuff.
Mm.
Big on flowers at anniversaries and flowers at big times, and she's big on, I would not dare skip any of that. She is one of those that's big on that stuff.
She's romantic.
She is.
What about emoji?
I'm a romance killer. She calls me the romance killer.
I sent Louise some emoji flowers. That's the new modern way of doing it.
Man, you're an emoji guy, so I don't doubt that whatsoever. You got emojis for everything. So, all right. On to the Tao.
Okay.
31st chapter. Let's take a moment and just get centered before we start. All right. Okay. 31st chapter. Miss Kate, are you ready to read?
I am. First translation. Good weapons are instruments of fear. All creatures hate them. Therefore, followers of Tao never use them. The wise man prefers the left. The man of war prefers the right. Weapons are instruments of fear. They are not a wise man's tools. He uses them only when he has no choice. Peace and quiet are dear to his heart, and victory no cause for rejoicing. If you rejoice in victory, then you delight in killing. If you delight in killing, you cannot fulfill yourself. On happy occasions, precedence is given to the left. On sad occasions, to the right. In the army, the general stands on the left, the commander-in-chief on the right. This means that war is conducted like a funeral. When many people are being killed, they should be mourned in heartfelt sorrow. That is why a victory must be observed like a funeral. All right, the second translation. Weapons are the tools of violence. All decent men detest them. Weapons are the tools of fear. A decent man will avoid them except in the direst necessity, and if compelled will use them only with the utmost restraint. Peace is his highest value. If the peace has been shattered, how can he be content? His enemies are not demons, but human beings like himself. He doesn't wish them personal harm, nor does he rejoice in victory. How could he rejoice in victory and delight in the slaughter of men? He enters a battle gravely, with sorrow and with great compassion, as if he were attending a funeral. Third translation. Weapons are the bearers of bad news. All people should detest them. The wise man values the left side, and in times of war, he values the right. Weapons are meant for destruction, and thus are avoided by the wise. Only as a last resort will a wise person use a deadly weapon. If peace is her true objective, how can she rejoice in the victory of war? Those who rejoice in victory delight in the slaughter of humanity. Those who resort to violence will never bring peace to the world. The left side is a place of honor on happy occasions. The right side is reserved for mourning at a funeral. When the lieutenants take the left side to prepare for war, the general should be on the right side because he knows the outcome will be death. The death of many should be greeted with great sorrow, and the victory celebration should honor those who have died. And the final translation. Weapons are terrible things. If you want to get right with Tao, reject weapons. The master, knowing all things came from Tao, recognizes what he has in common with his enemies and always tries to avoid conflict. But when there is no other choice, he uses force reluctantly. He does so with great restraint and never celebrates a victory. To do so would be to rejoice in killing. A person who would rejoice in killing has completely lost touch with Tao. When you win a war, you preside over a funeral. Pay your respects to the dead.
Okay, that's pretty somber at face value. You guys get anything out of that? What?
I got two things out of it. I got the there's two ways that look at this. I think last week I kind of pulled myself up for looking at some of these things too literally, rather than spiritually. But when I looked at this one today, I thought it's difficult not to look at it literally. Mm-hmm. When we look at things like war and peace, I practice Taekwondo, and any of our patterns always start with lefts, with left-hand defense. We never start a pattern with an attack. If we're doing anything with a left hand, it's normally for defense and attacking with the right. So I can see where he's talking about the attacker standing on the right, or the aggressor on the right and the defender on the left. We practice that principle in Taekwondo, which is a Korean martial art, so it's from around the same area. What I noticed was some of the way they were talking. I think it was a third translation that says delight in the slaughter of humanity. Now I picked up the fact that the author said delight with the slaughter of humanity, didn't use the words delight in the slaughter of humans. So I think it's looking at the base way of how they do war. It's not the killing people, it's actually the killing a way of life, the killing that value of peace, and they're bringing on a different set of values into it. I find this one quite literal because it wasn't until I read the Derek Lin translation that reminded me that when this was written, it was a Chinese text that was written 2,500 years ago, which at the time there was a lot of war in that sort of area with various dynasties, not trying to seize power. So I find this one quite a literal verse rather than a spiritual verse. That's what I took from those ones. If we look at the I think going back to the if you look at the way of warfare these days, if 9 times out of 10 our wars are done at the end of a computer and we're firing missiles left, right and centre, whereas in the old days it was people near hand to hand, actually physically up close fighting and killing each other. So I think that could be to do with taking away the humanity as well, because it took away the personalness of war.
Yeah, you touched on that Eastern thought of war coming from the right side.
That's right, yeah.
They talk about that in every translation.
Yeah.
And peace from the left and war from the right.
That was new to me. I didn't know that.
It was the same. It was the same with things like gladiators as well. You notice that most gladiators would have their weapon in the right hand and the shield in the left hand. I don't know if anybody ever noticed that, but that's really why they was taught that. It goes to the old days in school. We had a girl that was left-handed in school, and she was always getting pulled up for writing wrong because she was writing with the wrong hand. Everybody was taught to write with the right hand because the teachers or the people in authority, they were writing with the right hand. So I think it was really passed on from that side of things. I could be completely wrong, but you'll notice that the majority of gladiators and martial artists will always defend with the left rather than the right. And
if you look at any of those, I noticed this actually watching Khan, Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
He had his army generals that were his war generals on his right side, and his training people on his left. If I remember correctly, I believe I noticed it in that.
Yeah.
And so everything from that part of the world, that's why they talk about right and left at the first part of this, I think. Any other comments?
I try to relate it spiritually and just change weapons into words as weapons, but it doesn't quite fit,
Well, you have your emotions as well, which could be used as weapons. So things like anger and resentment, it's obviously like more of an aggressive term of thinking or using words. Whereas if you have things like love and peace, that's more of a pacifist way of going through things.
I was looking at this. How can I stop using weapons of war in relationships? How can I stop using weapons of war in business? These are some questions I ask myself.
And do you?
No, not as much.
All right.
But I just, I think that's for me, if you look at a spiritual application of this, that would be the questions to ask. Do I delight in winning? Do I like to see others grovel? That's the kind of questions this brings out.
Yeah, I like the line in the third translation. If peace is her true objective, how can she rejoice in the victory of war?
Mm-hmm.
That goes to me, that speaks to like intentions. What are our intentions with things? If peace is my true objective, am I rejoicing in other people's, downfalls?
Right.
Right.
How about this in the third, Kate? The wise man values the left side, the side of peace, the side of defense. From the first translation, about halfway through, if you delight in killing, you cannot fulfill yourself. In relationships, in business, if I delight in having victory and ruining someone in business or in relationships even, I can't be fulfilled if I do that. Even in disagreements that I have with someone, if I delight in being right, I think that would be even a lesser form of this, but still this. I can't, I have to value everyone. And I got to thinking about the fact that we're all part of one, right? So when I harm another person, I am harming me. I think that's the idea behind, if you do a spiritual application to this, that we cannot take pleasure in anyone being decimated in any way. We can't take pleasure in that.
It's very
How about
true.
this one from the second one? It says, peace is his highest value. And that's talking about wholeness, according to the Stephen Mitchell commentary. It's about wholeness, where he talks about weapons are tools of violence. The decent men detest them. Weapons are the tools of fear. A decent man will avoid them, except in direct necessity, and if compelled, will use them only with the utmost restraint. In other words, if I'm in a disagreement with someone, I don't disagree more than I have to. I don't. You know, I've had times I've taken real pleasure in proving someone wrong, which I'm not proud of, but used to. That was a thing I really enjoyed. I liked when someone disagreed with me when I knew I was right and I could prove it. Have you guys ever experienced that, where you took pleasure in proving that you were right?
Tried, yeah, but it never proved that satisfactory.
Exactly. That's
right. It never proved to be all that satisfactory.
You never got the reward you were looking for. You know, never. And I think that's the spiritual application of this. I think that's why at the end, when they talk about the victory celebration should honor those who have died, or that it's like attending a funeral, is the same thought, is that it's still there. We try to seek a better way than the way of conflict in whatever it is that we're talking about. If it's even with our spouse, or with the person who we have a car accident with, or whatever it is. Can we resolve this without a fight? And actually, for me, I go back to page 84 in the big book. We quit fighting anything and anyone, even alcohol. So if I quit fighting, how, the next question is, of course, how do we do that? His enemies are not demons, but human beings like himself. So we've got to remember when we're in a conflict that the person we're in the conflict with is like me. They're not different from me. We're part of the same body.
That was something that came up in the Let Go book as well. It was talking about the guy that he forgave his. He was in a German concentration camp, and he forgave the guards at the camp because he realised he accepted the fact that they were there doing a job. It wasn't the fact that they wanted to do it. It's the fact that that's what they'd done. They weren't at the head of this. It wasn't their decision to help people there. They were just employed to do that. I think probably employees. I'm not making light of it. I think employees a bit of a light word for using it, but just putting it in relation for forgiving or just not blaming the other person for being there. It goes back to the saying as well: be humble in victory and gracious in defeat as well, rather than gloating on being right.
Were you reading Man's Search for Meaning? Is that where you got that from? Where he forgave the concentration camp guards?
It was in the Hawkins book, Letting Go.
But it was him. It was the same guy. What's the guy that wrote that book?
Viktor Frankl wrote it.
Yes, it was him. He was quoting him. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's hard to forgive those guys. But anyways, all right.
It would be.
Let's move on.
Stop fighting everything. Do I delight in others' failures? Is there anyone that I know that it makes me feel good when they don't succeed? that I get a little bit of pleasure. Oh, Craig's raising it. Craig's grinning.
Perhaps in Taekwondo, yes. But
No,
Tell us, Craig.
it's a work in progress.
Okay, now he backs off. Oh, I'm getting better.
No, I'll tell you what. No, I'll spill the beans. Right. So I just had a phone call from somebody thanking me for something that I raised to his attention, and he says, "Do you know what? Nobody's ever raised that to my attention." I'm like, "I raised that to your attention a year and a half ago." So I'm kind of gloating, but I'm trying not to. I'm trying to be humble. It's not working.
you know what I found when I do that is they don't really give a shit. It's like, hey, I told you that a year and a half ago. And they're like, yeah, so?
It's funny you should say that because when I pointed that out to him, he hung up. I'm over it now. That's it. I've had my 5 minutes.
Good.
Okay, I've had situations in business where I'd have a competitor and I'd get a little bit of happiness when they did not succeed at something or they failed with a client, or that's, I learned a long time ago in recovery and applying recovery to my business that I had to pray for my competitor's success. Even if they were doing things I thought were not honest,
Mm-hmm.
I still had to pray for their success, because the problem was not how they were behaving. The problem was how much angst it was bringing me. So I started praying for them to succeed.
And that worked?
Yes, it worked.
And what about just changing your thought process? I lost my thought. Changing your thought process so that you don't gloat in their failure.
That was
Not
part
just
of the process of learning to do that too, Marla. Me gloating in their failure told me that I had more work to do on that.
Mm-hmm.
That I was still holding some anger and resentment there that was not noticeable until the situation arose.
Got it.
And the way I worked on that was praying more for them and surrendering to them, really, in the whole process of, what we learned to do in recovery to get rid of that, which is mostly sending good thoughts, praying for them, sincerely wanting their business to succeed, God to give them what they needed, give them what I want, all those things that we learned. That's part of this conflict, and I think that can apply to this, that these weapons, that the way of violence, the way of using force is not the best way. Like we talked about last week, that every time that there's force, we exert force. Every time there's force back at us, there's a counter force. Every time. So the more we use force, we only use what is necessary. And even with that, there's resistance. I think that's really a lot of what this is talking about. But avoiding war in life was the notes I have on this. How can I avoid conflict? If you don't talk, just say conflict. How can I avoid conflict in life? In relationships, in job, in business, in any interaction. And what I've noticed a lot of times, my first response a lot of times is a negative response. Mm-hmm. I don't automatically respond with love.
Yes, I have an example of that kind of.
Cool.
So there's a guy that has the same job description of me, and we both work together. We work together sometimes, and he is really, really, really good at his job, and he does really great at running these groups, and he is always getting super positive feedback from all that. They're always like, we love this guy. He is the best counselor. Blah, 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 blah. Like, he gets all this positive feedback. And I'm always, I'm glad. He's a really great guy. He's really nice. So part of me is like, oh, that's great. But part of me is like, well, I want this positive feedback. Why is he getting all this positive feedback, Part of me is like a little bit resentful against him that he's like so great and I'm not as great.
Oh, God.
So, like, part of the petty little part of myself is like, well, I wish they wouldn't say so many great things about him. Just shut up,
That's so normal.
That's funny, Kate. So what action are you taking to get rid of that pettiness?
I don't know. I was only just really thought about it. When we were talking about this, it only just really occurred to me that I'm feeling that way.
It's tough because it's like they're saying how great he is, which means you're not that great.
Right.
But, they're really not saying that.
I know, but it feels like they're saying that.
I know.
Thank you, Marla.
But you can't take that personally.
No, you can't.
And he really is very good.
Good for him.
He is great.
You're blushing. You're playing me hair. And you're playing me hair as well, just when you talk about him.
Hey, Kate, can you leave positive feedback for him too? Is there a way that you can do that?
Yes, I suppose.
That might be a way to help get over that, And maybe pray for him to have more positive feedback, for him to feel great about his job.
Uh-huh.
That might be a way to get rid of that in you, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try it.
Try it and let us know next week if it works.
Okay.
I bet you will.
That happens a lot with yoga teachers. We're not supposed to be competitive with each other, but there's always one teacher that everybody just gloms onto. I want to be that good, and why isn't anybody coming to my class? And it's hard to be, it's hard to look at that great teacher and go, oh, she's so wonderful. I want to be that wonderful. It's really hard to do that, but it's just, you can't take it personally, and you got to be yourself. That's all. You just got to do your best.
Is it quite competitive being a yoga instructor?
Unfortunately, it is. Yeah.
It's ironic. I mean, it's kind of a paradoxical that it is.
That's what I was thinking. I'd love to see you lot fighting.
No, we don't fight. We fight with words. We fight with words. If
yoga mats at dawn.
I can do a headstand longer than you.
That's the fight. Yes.
That's like a really soft pillow fight, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Hey, Kate.
Yeah.
This guy's been doing this job a lot longer than you.
Yeah.
Well, of course he's going to be better than you.
Yeah.
Right.
What if it were me? I would try. First of all, I would just tell myself, it's okay for me to think that he is better than I am at this job. And just feel that for a minute, not try to resist feeling it. That's what we've been learning in the Letting Go book. I never learned to allow myself to feel a feeling. I always resisted feeling the feeling, and that force that we talked about, it would push back. It's like a thought in meditation. So just allow yourself to feel that for a minute, and you'll be amazed at how quick that'll just flitter away. Then to keep it from coming back, maybe you can take some of these recovery tools we learn, like thinking good thoughts for him, praying for him. If you can do an actual good feedback of him, even if you could say, to him, you do such a great job. Hopefully one day I can, I hope to learn a lot from you. What you could say that is really appropriate that would come from a larger self rather than a smaller self.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Try some of that and see if it doesn't give you a lift.
Yeah.
And carry you out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what this is talking about, really, is those conflicts that we have, even those small conflicts, not to fight those conflicts, and not to use those weapons of war when those things arise. I was thinking also about the fact that, that we're a mirror. So when we're angry and resentful at people, that's what we're getting back. When we fight, we're getting that fight back. And part of the reason it harms us is because we're fighting ourselves. If we're all connected, we're really doing damage to ourselves when we do damage to someone else.
Oh, yeah.
That's why we don't get pleasure out of it. Now, if we're not very spiritually connected, we can't see that. We just might not understand why that doesn't bring us the pleasure we thought it would. But it's because we're fighting ourselves ultimately. Anything else before we go to the commentaries?
Nope.
When someone has cancer and they take chemo, and I put a note down here, is chemo similar to this? Like when I fight a cancer, let's say, and I go through all the cancer treatment, part of that treatment, and Kate, I'm sure you could do better explaining this, but my understanding is that I'm doing damage to my body to kill another thing in my body when I do chemotherapy to my body. Is that correct?
Yes.
So is not, when we use these weapons in relationships, a lot of the same thing? In that we're using a weapon of war in the relationship or in the interaction. And it's really killing us too, to a degree.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It is. It's poison.
It is. It's poison.
Mm-hmm. It's like taking poison, hoping the other person dies.
The resentment quote. Yeah. Exactly. So I thought about chemo with that too. Was how that would be an application of, it's like us taking chemo. It's killing us too at the same time. Okay, what commentaries? Let's skip to Stephen Mitchell. Does someone have the Derek Lynn? Do you have that correct?
Yeah, I've got Lynn, yeah.
Do you have any parts of that stuck out to you?
Just really the part where he was talking about the when this Tao was written.
Okay.
It just really highlight the fact as to why all of a sudden Lao Tzu's talking about a military or more of like a physical form rather than the spirituality of the Tao. And I think that's where I got the idea of putting people against people, putting other people's, not so much other people's wills against each other, because I'm sure when some of these people go to the battles, it wasn't their idea to do it. They were kind of forced into doing it. So I think that's again how you take some of the humanity out of war. Also, as well, a lot of these, a lot of the people that were in these wars were kids as well. A lot of kids were trained, like samurai kids were trained from 4 or 5 years on to fight in wars. So again, it just really does take a lot of humanity out of it, and it goes against a lot of what Lao Tzu's teaching in the Tao. A lot of acceptance. I can see there is a time for defence. I'd rather work on a defensive measure than an offensive measure.
We see the victory parade in the aftermath of war as a funeral march, no matter which side happens to be the victor.
Right. No good outcome.
No good outcome. If there's a better way, let's find a better way.
Well, Gandhi spoke of that. Nonviolence.
A way I started approaching any conflict is one of my first questions in the conflict, whatever it is, how can I take the fight out of this? What can I do to take the fight out? As a real question. I got a really good example of this. We, at our clubhouse, our AA clubhouse, I used to do heat and air work, so I was helping with the heat and air. We're trying to get our bills under control. So I put a programmable thermostat up, like a Nest, so that we could program it and do good. Someone stole it because they didn't like the thermostat being programmed. Yeah, okay. It's a bunch of drunks, okay? And you get people in there anyway. And the guys that ran the thing said, let's put a box over it so that, they can't get to it. I said, no, let's not add to the fight. How can we take the fight out? So I've made a board and put the thermostat up into the ductwork and put one on the wall that they could do anything they wanted to with, and it didn't work except during the meeting. So it took the fight out.
There you go.
So I was looking for a way to stop the fight. So I started looking in every relationship, every interaction. If I'm mindful at the moment, okay, wait, this fight is starting. What can I do to stop the fight? There's got to be another way. Is this really worth this fight? Those are the things I started asking myself, because just like in war, if there's another solution to my conflict I'm having with another person, let me find that solution. Sometimes that solution is me taking the road of kindness regardless of if they take the road or not.
We can only do what we can do. It's war seems to be inevitable. People just seem to fight all the time. And it takes us, maybe all of this mindfulness and this self-study to really create that peace. It's like the rest of the world isn't really with us on it. It takes two people to fight, Marla. If we're talking about like a personal, like if I'm fighting with someone. It does, but they're not gonna self-examine and say, hey, how can I take the fight out of this? It's up to us people. And we're lucky in that way that we have those tools. Most people do not. I notice.
In the 79th, this is on my wall of Tao. Someone must risk returning injury with kindness, or hostility will never turn to goodwill. That's from the 79th Tao Te Ching. So the wise always give without expecting gratitude. So I've got to risk sometimes returning injury with kindness. I remember with my wife sometimes, if we were fighting about something, or she started something, if she was ill, like I get less, but I have done in the past, and it was her turn to be ill, and she was starting to fight me about something, I said, honey, I'm not going to fight you about that. I'm not going to say a word. I'm not responding. Say anything you want to say, but I am not fighting about that. And it would stop, because if I don't respond, it can't continue. Now, it may, the other person may say some things that, in trying to get me to respond, but if I continue not to respond, the fight stops. Keeping that in mind is, I think, part of this too.
Yeah.
Part of this too. Okay, we want to look at the Wayne Dyer real quick before we go.
Want me to read it?
Yeah. Read what parts you so desire.
Well, we've talked about the weapons. The second paragraph, living without weapons, it's on 151. From his position as an observer and a being of divine wisdom, Lao Tzu recognized that there's no victory in any activity where killing takes place. We just discussed that. Why? Because all people, regardless of their geographic location or belief system, are connected to each other by their originating spirit. We all come from, retain, and return to the Tao. When we destroy each other, we are destroying our opportunity to allow the Tao to inform us, to flow freely in and through the form we're in. What appears to our ego to be a victory to celebrate is really a funeral or a time to mourn. Lao Tzu reminds us that taking pleasure in winning a battle is aligned with an ego will to kill. The Tao has only a creative, nurturing, and loving will. On this physical plane, our highest nature expresses itself through the precepts of the Tao, while our lowest nature expresses itself by engaging in the business of killing. So here's an exercise. Begin to see the use of physical or verbal weapons as unwanted responses. Change your need to defend yourself to a stance of realizing that this is evidence you're ignoring. This is evidence you're ignoring the teachings of your source of being. Refuse to consider using weapons of violence in any form by noticing your language and abolishing hatred from your vocabulary. Replace defending your right to possess and use arms with an attitude that all deaths from such instruments are signals of detachment from the wisdom of the Tao. When enough of us reach a critical mass in our thinking so that it disallows the existence of weapons, we'll be moving the direction of our world. No longer will we be able to evaluate the planet's level of civilization by the sophistication of our weapons. Instead, the measurement will be on the Tao scale of how well we're able to feed and love each other. Then, being civil will authenticate the root word found in civilization. That's practical wisdom. That's practical.
But, and it starts with our relationships. It starts with me.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's why it's love your neighbor as yourself, not love Africa as yourself. It's about your neighbor. It's about the people around you.
It is, but you're right. It starts with how we relate to ourselves as well, and how civil am I to myself? How many things can I say to myself that are loving rather than, full of self-hatred and self-loathing?
That's something I hadn't thought about, Marla, was the application of this to me fighting against me.
That's where it begins, though.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if I'm not in connection with the love that's within me and not fighting me, and if I don't have that connection, how can I share that same love? If I'm not loving me, how can I love someone else?
Correct.
Huh.
That all comes down to your ego then, doesn't it? That all comes down to basically trying to contain your ego or taking your ego out of situations and doing.
Yeah. And it goes back to getting rid of guilt and shame too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is really huge for us. Being in rehab for 2 weeks, that was the theme. A lot of our didactics and tech talks were about guilt and shame and how to avoid that, really. But it's we all feel that because we just can't understand why we're addicts, and relapsing is a big thing of guilt and shame, and the way we treat our loved ones and our families, and real big source of guilt and shame.
Well, we're this mirror, so if we feel bad about us, how can we feel good about anyone else?
Right.
It's not possible. It's not possible. We can pretend for a while, but eventually it's going to come out. I was reading, actually, this is from the Letting Go book, Hawkins, Letting Go, Pathway of Surrender. There was a good chapter on guilt where he was talking about any time that I say I should have done something different, or I should do that better, or any of those type I'm not enough questions, that I have guilt and shame within me that I need to get rid of. That I am perfect in the moment. I'm just like I'm supposed to be. I started bringing things to attention that I'd never thought of, because I've always thought, I should do that better, or, I should be further along than that, or, all those, beat me up about things that don't really matter, but that guilt is still there in little ways, even ways that I wouldn't say I had guilt, but I really did, and I didn't know how to see it. So I've been working on that.
And sometimes, I got to say, that kind of worked for me in a way, the guilt and shame, because it got me into rehab. That worked. So I was sick of feeling like that.
Right. But you're taking action for it, Marla. You're taking action to get rid of it.
Yes, because I was sick of it. I'm sick of being sick. So sometimes it works. It worked for me, in that it got me to do something actively against it and to come out of it, the guilt and shame. So it's very common for alcoholics to feel it, guilt and shame.
Yes, I've experienced that myself and seen it in a lot of sponsees.
Yeah.
I see women talk about that a lot more than men. Men suppress that a lot, though. Mm-hmm. Men still have it. They just suppress it instead of getting rid of it. They don't acknowledge it. Yeah,
I think the problem with men is that, again, it comes to pride. Men just as men don't talk about emotions. I never talk about my emotions unless I'm with my sponsor. I find it very difficult to talk to my wife about things because I want to be the alpha male. And I see myself as the one that's supposed to be here, have all the answers and be the rock and the support of everybody. I don't want to be seen as helpless. And it is difficult for men to talk about this. I mean, I talk to my sponsor about things that, I'm very comfortable talking to him about it because I know that anything that I say to him is not going to go any further. But yeah, the guilt and shame, it racks everybody. And I think me personally, I was going to say, I think we should be able to deal with it better. I think if I had been able to deal with it better, if I'd have listened to people and actually paid attention to what was going around myself rather than being so absorbed in myself, then I probably would have seen things and be able to handle things a lot better than I actually did.
Well, hindsight is 20/20. Mm-hmm. And you get to it when you get to it. It's about maturing and really working to get well.
Yeah,
I think, and we're a lucky group of people. We have to work on ourselves in order to get better, whereas the rest of humanity doesn't really give a shit about growth.
Hey, Craig, did you see what you just did?
Did I see what I just
did?
You
were talking about guilt, and you showed guilt while talking about guilt, talking about how you should have done better. That's good.
And now I feel guilty about wasting 2 minutes with everybody.
but that shows how it's so prevalent, and we don't see it.
Yeah,
it's just a way of life. That as we become more spiritually awake, we can start addressing. So I've started when I say, oh, I should have done that better, or I should have been further along with it, whatever it is. Wait a minute. No, I'm exactly like I'm supposed to be. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. I'm perfect in this moment. If I could be different, I would be different. It is what it is. Thank you. And then I go into gratitude about how great things are and how my life is good when I look at the good things.
That's a big thing.
I'm sorry, Marla?
That's gratitude is really number one. It has to be number one. Good discussion.
Yeah, me too. Gratitude, the great thing about gratitude is that you don't have to have any belief to have gratitude. You can just look at what's already happened and list the things that's happened. That's what I do. And I can look at that and be confident that things are going to continue being well for me and working out like they need to because they have in the past. So why should I think any different now? And if I don't understand something and some situation it seems like it doesn't fit, I don't try to tag it. I just say, okay, I just don't understand that yet. And eventually every situation I end up understanding what's behind things as time goes on, because I can always look back and see it if I'm patient and if I wait.
Mm-hmm.
But taking the fight out, so huge. It's so huge. So
yeah.
I guess that's the challenge, and I really liked what you read, Marla. Begin to see the use of physical and verbal weapons as unwanted responses out of Dyer. That's so good.
We need practical applications, We need to be told how to do things because our way just wasn't working before.
Yeah. And it still won't work. And the goal, like I said, is to quit fighting everything, even alcohol. So how do we do that? And this is part of the way we do it. This is part of it. So good. Anything else before we close?
No. Good discussion today.
There's a bit in Romans 12 that talks about about helping your enemy. Scriptures tell us that if you see your enemy hungry, go buy that person lunch, or if he's thirsty, get him a drink. Your generosity will surprise him with goodness. Don't let evil get the best of you. Get the best of evil by doing good.
The best of evil by doing good. It didn't say, well, you can't pop them in the mouth, so do this instead.
No, right? That's the next page.
This is second best.
I was getting to that.
You can't do that, so just do something good for him instead. He said, no, get the best of evil by doing good. So the best thing you can do for something evil is to do good.
Yes.
That's the very best you can do.
And it starts with us.
And it's not a lame excuse. It's not a lame thing to do instead. It is the very best thing we can do.
Okay.
That's good. Good note to close on. Guys, have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. For more information about the SRC, go to thesharepodcast.com. Share is spelled SHAIR, and look for the Share Recovery Community link. When you join the SRC, you will be able to participate in this meeting and many more live, plus access to a video library of past meetings and many more benefits for being a part of this growing community. Thanks again for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share this podcast with your friends in recovery.